What step do you take when you feel like God doesn't hear your prayer, when you need God to move in your life and it feels like He doesn't listen? Maybe you're going through something right now this morning and asking God, how? I think that's on me. All right. Maybe you're going through something this morning and asking God, how could you be doing this to me? My name's Jonathan Tock. I'm here from Grace River Church in St. Peters, Missouri, and just so excited to be here this morning speaking to all of you. And today, really, we're planning to dive into that doubt together, to dive into some of those hard questions together. And my prayer this morning is just that we can talk through that doubt, and we can talk through the fact that doubt isn't the enemy of faith. And in fact, doubt can be the very thing that leads us to a deeper relationship with Christ. And I'm going to walk through some practical steps that you can take with you this week to continue to overcome the doubt that you may have in your life. And but to start out, I have a confession to make. Every time I speak, before I come up and I speak, I have this moment where I walk in and I swear that my iPad's going to die. I'm going to forget what my name is. I'm going to trip going up these stairs. These are terrifying, right? I'm going to do everything wrong that I can, and I'm just going to completely forget my name. I'm going to talk way too fast, and more importantly, this beautiful message of the gospel is not going to meet the person in the room that needs to hear it. And I just doubt everything as I come up onto the stage, and I'm sitting there thinking this message that I've prayed and I've prepped over for the last few weeks, it's just not going to have the impact in someone's life that it could. And then worship starts, and I think this is true for a lot of us. Worship starts. You guys have amazing worship here, and they start singing, and all of a sudden it's like that doubt starts to melt away, that worry, that anxiety starts to melt away, and I realize I do know my name. I have my whole notes printed out. I have an iPad, I have a computer. We get through it no matter what happens. I realize all of these things but more importantly is I remember who God is, and I remember that it's not me speaking, it's not my message, but it's the message that God has given us in this morning. I just hope this morning you felt the same way when worship started. You felt all of that anxiety, and anything that you may have came in with this morning kind of start to melt away as you come to church. And I hope last weekend was Easter, which I don't know, for me that feels like it was way longer than just a week. This has been a long week, and I think for most people it feels that way. But I hope you left last weekend on Easter and you just felt on fire for Christ. I mean, you're here this morning, so that shows that it had an impact, and I hope you left just on fire for all the things that Christ is doing in your life and all the things that will happen through Him. And Sunday was great. I mean, our family, we talked about it after Sunday. We're like, wow, this might have been the best Easter we've ever had. I mean, it was just so powerful in our spiritual life. But then Monday comes, right? And most of us may go back to our job or back to our daily life, whatever it may be on Monday, and it can feel just like a wall. You go to work, and all of a sudden you're with some people that are complaining about the extra time they had to spend with family, or how they had to travel to their wife's house or their husband's family's house, whatever it may be. And it's very quickly, I think that fire starts to dull, and it starts to feel normal again. You just start to get back into your routine of the week and doing what the week feels like. And you feel that doubt creep in. And so that's really where we're going to dig in here this morning, what we're going to talk through. But I'm going to start with a story. I have a few stories to tell. I went a little long last time, so I'm going to tell them a little bit quicker this time, I promise. But for me, I'll never forget one morning. I was at a work conference in St. Petersburg, Florida, for about 5 days. And I remember waking up, and I looked at my phone, and I first of all, I plugged my phone in. And if you've ever woke up and realized that your phone had died, panic immediately sets in, right? I had a flight at 6:30 that morning. It was 8:10, and so we were already an hour and 40 minutes past when my flight took off. But I plugged my phone in, it turns on, I've got 15 missed calls from the Uber driver that I had planned to pick me up that morning. I had 25 Southwest notifications like, hey, this is going to cost you money. You really shouldn't have done this type notifications. And I realized I had missed my flight. And I'm the type of person that, like, we were up at 6 o'clock with the family to make sure everyone was ready to go. Like, I'm always 15 minutes early. I hate being late. And I don't miss flights. I never missed a flight. And this flight was even more important because I was speaking that night at Grace River to our student ministry, so our high school and middle school kids, about 100 kids I was speaking to, and I was panicking. I'm like, I'm going to miss this. I ruined it. I messed up, so I packed my bags. I get to the airport as quickly. I'm like running through the airport, which at that point, like, I had a new flight. I mean, I don't know why I was running through the airport, but that was my mind. I'm like, we have to get there. And I remember I'm telling the gate attendant the story of, like, why I'm late. And she's kind of standing there like, okay, people are late all the time. You're not the first person that's ever missed a flight. Like, relax, it's fine. But I'm telling her my story, and I'll never forget, like, this gray-haired and older Southwest gate attendant was like, honey, everything happens for a reason. I'm like, oh my gosh, that made me feel awful. That didn't make me feel better at all. Like, the reason is I stayed up too late, I didn't plug my phone in, and then I missed the flight. Like, the reason is me. It was my fault. And in that moment, the last thing I wanted to hear was like, hey, everything happens for a reason. And I made the flight. I mean, I ended up getting back. I still was able, the story had a great outcome. I still was able to preach that night. I made it back with minutes to spare. But I think the fact of the matter is, so often when you're in pain, people want to give you a catchphrase. And when you're in pain, you're not looking for a catchphrase. You're not looking to open, and I have done this, so I can say this. You're not looking to open the Bible and point to, Obadiah chapter 7, verse 10, or chapter 1, verse 10, and just get the answer. You're looking for answers. When you're in doubt, I think the same way, you want answers. And the pain for my story was simple. Like I said, there was another flight. We made the flight. We got on it. I got back. But often when you're looking for answers from God, the pain is much deeper. You may be struggling because people around you seem to have this Jesus thing figured out, and they look like they have it together, but you're still struggling. You still feel like you're just not where they are. And Easter was last weekend, and I'm sure someone in this room is even as I told the story about being on fire for Jesus, you're thinking like, I didn't really have that. That wasn't really how my Easter felt. I didn't come away rejuvenated and renewed and ready to do all these things and surrender all these things to Jesus. And it can be difficult. You're asking God, why do I not feel different? How can I trust God with everything in my life? You're asking, why am I doubting? And so we're going to go through a few stories. You're not alone in your doubt, but first we're going to start in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verse 24. I'm not going to go through all of chapter 9, but the story of this story in this case is that the apostles had tried to rid a demon out of this father's son, and they were unable to. And so they brought the child to Jesus, and they brought him to. So in Mark 9:24, it says, the father instantly cried out, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. And I love that because I think that's so often our feeling where we do believe. I do believe in God. I do come to church. I do pray. I do read my Bible. Like, I believe that Jesus came. He rose from the dead. All of that, I believe it. But I still have things that I'm holding. I still have doubt. I still have things that I just don't want to give over to God. And this isn't new. This feeling, you're not alone in this. In fact, some people closest to God wrestled with the same questions. I believe, but help me to overcome my unbelief. So we're going to go back to the very first book of the Bible, chapter 7, Genesis chapter 7, verse 17. God is talking to Abraham, or rather Abraham's talking to God, and Abraham bowed down to the ground, but he laughed to himself in disbelief. How could I become a father at the age of 100, he thought, and how could Sarah have a baby when she is 90 years old? I have a 95-year-old grandma. If she calls me after service and tells me that she's pregnant, like, I would have my doubts. I'd be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? There's no way that you are having a baby, right? And Abraham had his doubts. He doubted that God would provide. He doubted that God would meet him in this way and that he would have a child. And the end of the story is that he actually goes on to have many children, but he had his doubts that God would provide. In a similar way, we talked about the Israelites just a few minutes ago, but the Israelites had an Easter experience. Exodus 14:31. Remember that chapter. Exodus chapter 14, verse 31. Remember that for just a minute. It says, when the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him. They put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. But then, in Exodus chapter 16, verse 2 and 3, they said, there too, the whole community of Israel complained about Moses and Aaron. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat. We ate all the bread we wanted, but now you've brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. In less than 2 chapters, they had given up all hope, that they went from being in awe and they put their faith in the Lord and his servant Moses to saying, I would rather be killed. I would rather be dead than be here with them. And I think that's so much like the Easter experience. We come away from Easter, we're on fire, this is amazing. And then Monday happens, and then life happens, and it becomes difficult. It becomes hard. It feels like it would be better to not deal with it at all. They had doubts that God would provide. Even John the Baptist, who baptized the Son of God in Matthew chapter 11, verse 2 and 3, says, John the Baptist, who was in prison, heard about all the things the Messiah was doing. So he sent his disciples to ask Jesus, are you the Messiah we've been expecting? Or should we keep looking for someone else? John baptizes Jesus, but then when he's in his valley, he says, are you sure you're the guy? Like, why am I here in prison? What would be the point of this? Are you sure you're the right person, or should we keep searching? Should we keep looking for the Messiah himself? Is it really you? He had doubts again that God would provide. And then there was Thomas. Thomas was one of the 12 disciples, but he wasn't there when Jesus originally showed himself after death. John 25 says, they told him, they being the other apostles, told him, we have seen the Lord. But he replied, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands and I put my fingers into them and place my hand into the wound in his side. This is, again, someone who lived and traveled with Jesus. He would have seen the miracles that Jesus had performed, seen these amazing things. But he said, until I can physically feel it, even after everything he's seen, he doubts that it is true and that God could actually overcome death. He saw the crucifixion, and he saw Jesus being nailed to a cross. And he said, until I can touch his wounds, I can't believe. John goes on to say in chapter 26, 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. Then he said to Thomas, I'm going to stop there for a second. Can you imagine, you said all of that, and then Jesus comes back, and he just slowly kind of pans to you? That's what I envisioned in my head of, like, he looks at you, and you're sitting there like, oh no, I'm about to get yelled at. This is not going to be good. It immediately brought me back to playing high school basketball, and like when your coach is explaining something that went wrong the last game, and you're like, yeah, that was me. All of that you just mentioned, it was really nice of you not to call me out, but like that was me that made all of those mistakes, and that feeling of just like, oh no, I'm going to get yelled at. This is not going to be good. And that's what I imagine as we go into verse 27. But let's keep going here. In verse 27, he said to Thomas, put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. Now, Thomas's decisions were so full of doubt that he picked up the nickname. If you've ever heard someone called the Doubting Thomas, I mean, that's not a nickname that I would want to hold. Like, it's negative, right? You've never said, oh, that guy's a Doubting Thomas. I really enjoy being around him. He's really a fun guy. Like, it's something that is difficult. It's not a nickname that you would want. And Thomas was doubting, and so I don't want to say, like, Thomas didn't have doubts. I mean, he deserved the nickname. Don't get me wrong. But more than Thomas's doubt is that Thomas was honest. He was outspoken with his beliefs, with his struggles. And I think it's just amazing to look at what Jesus did. Jesus didn't shame Thomas. He could have. He could have said, how about now? Like, I heard what you were saying. How about now? What do you think about this? He didn't shame Thomas. He didn't make him feel bad. He could have done all of these things, but just like the father with the possessed son, Jesus pulled the demon out of his possessed son, just like Abraham and his wife Sarah, just like the Israelites, and I believe just like in your story, as your personal story and walk with faith is being written, he defeated the doubts. He defeated the doubts that we have today, and he turned those doubts into a declaration of God and of being the Lord and Savior of his life. A few verses later, Thomas says, "My Lord and my God." And we celebrate Good Friday and everything today still as a reminder of our doubts, the doubts that keep us stressed and worried about the world and about what's happening. God tells us to lean into those doubts, to talk through those doubts. He'll move in our lives, and he will still today turn those doubts into a declaration of faith. And so I promised I would help overcome these doubts, and so we're going to go through a few steps and cover all of that. But I'm going to start with a story. So Noah actually joined us. So this is about my 5-year-old son Noah in the back, and there's blonde hair back there. But last summer, my wife and I decided we need to teach Noah how to swim, because they were like, all right, the earlier you teach a kid how to swim, the more likely he is to be good at swimming and learn how to do that. And I remember driving there vividly. I remember driving to my parents' pool, and I remember Noah saying, like, "Dad, I know how to swim." And it's like, he didn't. He had never swam without a life jacket. He would drown if you set him in a pool. But he knew that he had to swim. I had my doubts, but he knew that he could swim. And I remember walking through like this large oversized gate that my parents have, that most pools have, just like safety gate to get through to the pool. And his face kind of turned from this like confidence of I know how to swim to that is not the bathtub that I imagined when I said that I knew how to swim. Like that is not what I thought. That's very unfamiliar. Water's cold. It's unfamiliar. It doesn't make sense. And so my first practical step for overcoming doubt this morning, step 1, is to just put your face in the water. Spiritually, this is what it feels like when doubt surfaces, is that the world and everything in our body tells us to retreat. We don't want to be the person at small group or the person in a Bible study that's like, I just don't get this. I'm having trouble overcoming this. You don't want to put yourself in that place. And this is where Thomas found himself. Unless I see the nail marks in his hand and put my finger where the nails were, my hand in his side, I will not believe, because Thomas had seen the pain of the crucifixion to believe too easily. But by stepping into that doubt, by naming it out loud, he opened an opportunity for Jesus to respond, with grace. And so my first step this morning of putting your face in the water is about facing your doubt. Doubt is not failure. It's just the first step towards trust. Just like stepping into the water, when you see the big pool for the first time, it's scary, but it's where the journey begins. And if any of you, it's your first time here today, or your first week was last weekend, stepping into that first step, like congratulations, that's amazing. The first step is always the most difficult. Step 2 of overcoming doubt and of swimming. Also, you guys didn't know I won't even charge extra for learning how to swim. This is a 2-for-1. You get it for free. But step 2 is to trust your instructor. And when you're learning to swim, there's always someone beside you. And I'll never forget, for me, it was my second grade teacher, Miss Veneman, was also my swim instructor. And I'll never forget her telling my mom, like, it's okay if he struggles a little bit, get some water in his mouth. Like, when I was little, I was like, that's not okay. Actually, I'm drowning and you're just letting me drown. But that's not the point. Like, good instructors, we need those good instructors, just like in swimming as we do in our faith. And in our faith, it can feel like we're drowning. But Jesus is steady. He's close. The Bible tells us he is there with us. And often he sends other mentors, friends, right here in the church today, spiritual family, to help hold us up, but also to let us drown a little, to continue to grow closer to him. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there's no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. The same safety that comes as you're trying to learn how to swim comes as you're trying to build and grow a relationship with God. And God doesn't intend for you to struggle with that doubt alone. And that's why community, it's why church matters so much. So step number 3, as we go here, step number 3 is to learn to float. Now, watching my son learn to float was like watching a duck stuck in some reeds. Like it was just, it was not good. It's one of those where, he's sitting there and it's just like time and time again, and I'm getting frustrated. But the problem is the key to floating is to stop struggling. The key to floating is to stop trying to fight the water, stop trying to push. And, floating requires stillness, and it requires trusting that the water is going to hold you. I think you all see where this is going. Sometimes we try so hard to force answers from God. Like, God, give me patience and give it to me now. Like, I need these things, right away, like, why is this problem happening in my life? Why is my dad sick? Why is this happening? Why am I going through this? We want God to take away the pain so much that we miss the invitation to be still and to rest in God's presence, to learn to float and to continue to trust him. Psalm 46:10 reminds us this by saying, "Be still and know that I am God." Learning to float is learning to surrender. It's choosing trust even when the answers aren't clear yet, even when we don't know why. Learning to float is learning to surrender. Step number 4 is to practice kicking. Now, I'll go back to my son. I promise the last time I'll make fun of him. Maybe not. But learning to float it takes practice. And so if you remember that duck I was talking about a minute ago, now it has one leg kicking the water and it's going around in a circle. Like that was him swimming as he learned. But you have to practice kicking, and you're not going to swim across the pool in day one. Like it can take weeks and weeks of practice. And some weeks you're like, what the heck? They were better last week, and now he's scared of the water again? I feel like we went 4 steps back. And it's so hard. It's about trying again, and it's about building up strength. That was something that one of our instructors told us, is that it's not just about learning how to swim. It's about building up these new muscles that he's never used before so that he can learn how to swim. And I'll be honest with you, like it's challenging to me too, but doubt doesn't disappear in a moment. Doubt doesn't disappear because we've prayed the perfect prayer or because we've read the perfect verse. It's something we overcome by spending time with God, by praying, by spending time in the Word, by committing to come back to church, by coming back next week. And even then it still feels tough. But the challenge here is to practice kicking, because the steps matter. The muscle memory of going through your life with Christ matters. It's about progress over perfection. Jude 1:20 says, "But you, dear friends, by building yourselves up in the most holy faith and praying in the Holy Spirit." And what that's talking about is it's not just something we participate in. It's something we have to build up in our faith, even when our feelings don't line up. And just like Thomas, Jesus invites us to stop doubting and believe. And that's John 20, verse 27, because it's about progress over perfection. Step number 5, I almost went with close your mouth here, because if you've ever seen a 5-year or 4-year-old at the time learn to swim, I think they drink more water than they actually swim through. So I was going to go with close your mouth, but even a better one is just to keep your head up. As you learn to swim, and especially good swimmers, they learn to keep their head towards where they're going, their eyes forward, because if you look down, your body's going to naturally follow you. You're going to go too low in the water. You're not going to swim as fast. And faith in the same way demands focus. Hebrews 12, verse 2 calls us to fix our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, because when doubt crashes in and when you have these problems, you have to decide, where will my eyes go? Will they stay on the fear, the questions, the past doubt, the problems that I have in my life, or will I lift my head and focus on the perfection of Jesus Christ, the one who's never failed? The story of Thomas doesn't end in doubt. It ends in worship. And what I love about the story of Thomas is that Jesus could have waited until the apostles, talked him into saying, all right, I believe. Like he could have waited until Thomas figured himself out, till Thomas cleaned himself up and said, why would I ever doubt Jesus? Like, look at all these amazing things I've been a part of. How could I ever doubt him? But he doesn't do that. He shows up right where Thomas was, and he gives him exactly what he needs to believe. And then Jesus invites him to touch his wounds, and Thomas doesn't just say, okay, I believe now, but he says, my Lord and my God. And I think that's so critical to the story, because his doubt led him to a deeper revelation of who Jesus truly was, who God truly was in his life, not just someone that he was following, not just someone that did some amazing miracles, but his Lord and his God. And you may be walking through the valley of the shadow of doubt this morning, and my push for you is to just not stop there, to just keep swimming, because your doubt isn't the end of your faith, and I believe it might actually be the beginning of a stronger, deeper connection with Jesus. And I always love giving a verse to just think about through the week. What can I take with me through the week? Because Monday's still coming tomorrow. What can I take with me through the week? And I want you to just think through this verse of put your finger here. Stop doubting and believe. What do you need to put your finger on? What do you need to hand over to Jesus this week, to stop doubting, to stop holding it. We are the owners of nothing and the managers of everything. How can we continue to give that to Jesus, to stop doubting and believe? Because Jesus knows your doubts. He knows what you're struggling with. He knows right where you are. He's not offended by your questions or scared of your skepticism. And just like with Abraham and the Israelites and the Father and Thomas, I believe he will meet you right where you are and wrestling with whatever you have, because he loves you and he's standing there waiting for you. And so I'd ask that we bow our heads as we think about that doubt that we have in our mind and pray together. If you have that doubt, or even if you just have something to give over, use this time to pray a prayer just like this. God, thank you for your perfect Son, Jesus Christ. Thank you for his sacrifice, his ability to overcome sin and death so that I may freely have salvation. God, it is without you I could do nothing. I admit that I have doubt. I admit that I have skepticism. I admit that I have troubles, and I believe that giving those to you and continuing to walk the path of your Son, Jesus Christ, by handing over those problems, by handing over my doubt, by leaning on the spiritual role models you've put in my life, that I can grow closer to you. I believe in your Son, Jesus Christ, and I commit from this moment on that I will continue to be the owner of nothing and the manager of everything, because you own it all. It's all yours. And I commit to living from this moment on in surrender of your perfect love. Thank you. We love you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.